Right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our fourth webinar of this series on Let's Make a Show. So in the previous episodes, we kind of just talked about different topics for making Hog usable on a theater show. We talked about playbacks, talked about programming sections, talked about some different functions and features that you find more often when doing a theatrically based show. This last part of the series is just going to kind of wrap up some loose ends. We are going to talk about how to use the plotting engine of the console as well as how to pixel map on the console. We're going to do a couple of small projects with that. We're going to talk a little bit about some third-party protocols, so like what's like using OSC or Midi and Timecode, and then we're just going to talk about a couple of just random loose-end type stuff that we weren't able to cover in any of the previous videos that might be helpful for those that are doing Hog on a theater show. So, anything y'all want to add before we kind of get started on this, or?
No, I mean, pixel mapping is the most fun part, I think.
It's a pretty cool feature.
It honestly, when you have to sit there and come up with like color effects, Dan Hardiman came up with this amazing library that he's licensed to HES, and you have so many color gradations, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, we'll get to see that here in a second.
Yeah.
So I think let's just kind of hit the ball and just kind of go with it. I think what we're going to do is we're going to make a pixel map of the back wall fixtures. So that's all these fixtures on this back wall. I actually think we did this briefly in the previous video slightly, but basically they're each individually controlled LEDs, RGB LEDs. So to create a pixel map, it's really easy. You just select the fixtures that you want to map. I do have highlight on, keep that in mind. And then pig open and fixture is kind of the shortcut for opening up the plots window. And we'll hit record. And I'm just going to put plot 1. I'm going to clear my programmer and then hold open and touch on plot 1. Now it's always going to get you to a kind of a 1:1 aspect ratio of the fixtures that you have selected. There's not a way for the console to know exactly how they are oriented. So that's where you kind of have to kind of know the way that your grid is. And I believe our grid is 8 high.
Noah, is there a way that you can eliminate the mind the gap window so people can see the...
Oh yeah, let's just do this.
And while Noah's adjusting, I'll throw in that I like to record an empty plot first and then draw in my fixtures, just because then I can decide how I want to draw in my fixtures, like what shape, rather a line or a rectangle. Mainly also because I don't just use my plot for pixel mapping. I'll use my plot for actually selecting fixtures in specific orders when I need to. Just because it's easier for me to select over the number rather than actually type in some of the numbers depending on my fixture selection.
Yeah, and I actually do the same as well. I actually record a view that has, when I'm actually on a console, I'll set up a view that, on one side of my screen is the plot window, and then I'll have a smaller, depending on how many plots I'm doing, I'll have a smaller window that has the plot actually select, and then I'll have the media picker open, and sometimes the groups, but that's a...
So just so we can show both ways. So I do the way, I do both, but what you guys are talking about is selecting your fixture. So that's 701, I'll say through enter. And then coming over into your edit pane over here, select as a grid if that's what you're using, or you can use a circle if you're doing a circle or something like that. And you guys just do like a drag and drop type method, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And yeah, that's totally valid. It is going to kind of get it sort of a 1:1, so it's 14 by 14 here. I'll go ahead and size that back to 8 by...
And whenever you resize, you need to do columns first and then rows.
Right. Yeah. You can't do less than what you actually have.
Yeah. So that's just something I like when I teach Hog classes. I like to it's definitely because people will start immediately because rows is on top, and just the way that the mind works, they go to rows first. So always start with columns.
And I like to change my shape, but this is just a personal thing. I like to use squares.
You guys got some really fun new graphics in there in 3.13.
No,
Like I think the person is in there.
Yeah.
Let's resize that a little bit. So we'll do a 0, and I like to always center it. So the way you can center it really quickly is just pressing the down tick or the up tick, and typing in 0, enter, and 0, enter. And that'll center it really well. And then I like to just round off my width and height. So I'll do 800 by, let's just do 320-ish.
Now, why do you like to do that, Noah? So that
Because I am OCD and everything has to be like perfect non-decimal numbers.
Yeah.
But
It just
besides that,
helps me.
is there an actual reason besides that? Because like for me, I just leave it as long as it looks right. Like I just go with it. But
I mean, I do what Noah does in the centering to the center of my plot, just because I like you, I'll actually have multiple plots.
yeah.
Like, so when I was out with Alice in Chains, we had like I just had a main plot that was all my fixtures. So I could pixel map over the entire rig, or I can just select fixtures. So very much like a magic sheet, like on the EOS series.
And I also do it for like in this regard where I just threw on a pixel map layer here. So going over, click add a layer. But then what I do is if you click on it, once again, center it. So you know that the pixel map layer is perfectly in line with your grid. And then I can go back and take a look at this grid and I can see that's 800 by 320. And I come back over to the layer and I'll do actually 820, adding 20 extra units on, and then I'll do 340. And so now that layer is essentially it's proportional exactly to the grid.
Yeah.
So you'll get much cleaner looking pixel map content on there. And the reason why I do a couple of extra cells and really 20 probably wasn't enough is that when you start getting into like rotating your pixel map content and anything like that, you'll find that you get kind of dead zones in the corner. If you you make a square and you rotate it, you'll get that kind of dead zone in each corner. So I usually do it a little bit larger than that. We'll just add extra 100 on. So let's do 900 and then we'll do.
Another thing, a lot of the time people ask me, so for instance, on our older training file, which is the band that has the strips, the RGB strips that are kind of in a, designed in a kind of order. I find when I teach my classes, a lot of people try to actually draw it in that way. And I say to them, don't, because it's going to just make your map weird and you're actually making more work for yourself. Let the light hang position be exactly what it needs to be, and then just orientate your map in a grid like you're doing here, and you'll get the same effect, and it'll be much easier to draw that pixel map.
Yeah, you get happy little surprises. Something that I found is that this is currently 8 by 23, but you can get kind of a weird effect if you just make it like 9 by 23, and now everything is shifted off by 1. And now if you play pixel map content that normally goes across left to right, you'll actually get like a 45-degree diagonal. If you either take it by +1 or you do like plus 50%.
Yeah.
So if I were to do like 12 or something like that. So you get happy little accidents that way. If I remember correctly, the ordering on this is actually completely incorrect. There's kind of an example of what I was talking about, happy accidents. So that's where...
Oh, is that actually the order?
Change the order. No, it's wrong. It actually needs to start in the top left corner and then go down. And I think that's the right order.
Can you bring Dark Mind the Gap now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She probably wants to.
Because you have the highlight thing on.
Yeah, and we can
Cool. So there we go. Now we can test it. So I'll bring it back. So normally it's going to look like this when you draw your plot for those watching. And so it's actually not in the right order. So you actually do have to tell the gang to go to the right order. So basically we say the start point, which actually is in the top left-hand corner, and then the direction.
People can't see it because the mind the gap is up.
Man, you guys are... Wait, let's do this one. Let's do this preset. There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I've got some other stuff layered on top of my view, so...
Yeah, it's all good. We want everyone to see, because otherwise people will be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. So, all right. So I apologize for that. So now everything should be in the right order and in the right orientation. So let's throw some pixel maps on. I did assign this to be layer.
Did you show them how to patch in The
I
pixel
did
map?
not. I think we did that in a previous video, but if you guys are following along or if you're watching this video in the future and you don't have pixel map layers, so like these numbers here, they actually get added in your fixture scheduler. So it's not truly a real fixture, it's a virtual fixture. But if you go into the library essentially and you were to type in PIXEL and then scroll down to the cog manufacturer, you'll find the pixel map layer. So if you don't have that in your show, you just need to add them. And the reason why you want to have more than one is because you could have multiple layers going on at the same time. So I've done that for like if I've got like multiple different positions or trusses or whatever, or different drawn maps, I'll try to have everything have at least a unique layer, but you don't have to do it that way.
Yeah, and just be aware that if you have a map, a particular map running on a certain fixture, you can't, unless it's included in that pixel map, you can't have a secondary map in a second plot run on those fixtures. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, let's see.
Because you have to assign. So, well, we'll get to why when Noah actually shows us how to assign a pixel map.
Yes.
So we'll do this. We're
setting you up, Noah.
See, this would help if you had a view recorded. I'm just saying.
Hey, look what I'm doing right now. I just arranged my fixtures in such a way, or my windows in such a way that it's probably going to be better use for our time. So I opened up the media picker. For that is pig open and beam. Opened up the plots directory, which is pig open fixture, and then held open and touched on plot 1, and that got us to our plot. And we'll just record that as a view. So I'll record that as view 7, and we'll call that pixel map back. And now if we ever need to get to this arrangement, we can just recall back our view.
One thing that I like to do with the views, and I don't know if I was here when we talked about it, is I actually like to, on my view 10, make it a close all view, so that when it's open 0, and if you do open 0, it will open the view 10, which is your clear screen. So instead of going up and touching the views, I'm actually using the shortcut key like open 1, open 2, open 3, which correspond to the views. So Noah could hit open 7 and it will open up the pixel map view. Just a little shortcut.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do the exact same thing. So I'm gonna hold record on view 10, press set, and we'll call that closed.
So that way, when you're sitting there like really slamming stuff in the programmer, you can just, it's my open on my thumb and then my pinky's pushing the number.
Right. So open, and I'm just pressing different numbers, and then if I ever press open 0, it closes all my windows regardless of what I have open.
Yeah. Just little shortcuts to make programming faster.
Go back to that pixel map.
Especially since I think a lot of y'all have followed us along in this webinar. We might as well throw in this webinar series from like March. So it's good to put in all these shortcuts in every now and then.
Right. And let's pixel map.
Well, we need to reorientate the grid.
No, it's okay. I did it. I think it's oriented. It's
Yeah.
Did everyone see how that was done? Because the window was over it.
Yeah. So if your grid is not in the right order, you just want to select your gang block here, press on it, and then make sure that your start and your order is correct. If those of you that aren't super familiar with pixel mapping on our console, we actually have an entire video webinar on it kind of already. So I apologize if I'm going a little too fast for it, just because we're going to try to make a couple of plots in this webinar. But yeah, so simply to play back your content, you just select your fixtures, and that actually has fixtures selected in the programmer. You say plot 1, you hit enter, and then you select your pixel map layer essentially, which I believe is 601.
Do you not need to turn the fixtures to full anymore?
You never did.
Oh, I thought you did. My bad.
Oops. So 5 steps to pixel map. Select the fixtures you want to map. Select the plot you want to map them to. You press enter. You select your pixel map layer, tell it to go to full, and you choose your content.
The other thing is the RGB, CMY, HSI, depending on your fixture.
Yeah, I use it as CMY. I keep it on CMYI. but
As
you
do
can
I.
do whichever. But basically, now that we got our layer selected, we pick our content, and there we go. We're playing beautiful content on our stage. And you can bring in your own custom content. So if you are a media designer, you can bring in your own content.
There are some limitations, but
so there we go. So you can see what it looks like. Yeah, we do kind of downgrade the quality a bit, and there are some limitations on time and whatnot. This is all stock default concept that you can bring into the desk, but if you have your own content, you can use it. This is one of my favorites, the kind of breathing one.
Yeah. The other thing that's very cool is, and I don't know if we're going to get into it, but if you go into the intensity channel, you get gamma and contrast. And you actually can take this stock content and then start actually manipulating the gamma and the contrast, and you get different effects.
Make it like super, super saturated.
Yep. And you can also apply colors on top of this too.
So that's where things like, there's also static images as well. So you can go into a static image and then go to color, and you can actually start dialing in your own color.
And you could also actually
go ahead.
You're going to say it.
I'm probably going to say it, but I'll let you say it. You probably know what it is.
You can rotate the X, Y, and Z axes. So if you have a static content, you can actually make it. So, like for instance, if you have the swirly or the radiating lines or the X or the bar, you can actually, like that. So it doesn't have to be set to, say, static.
Yeah, it's fun. And again, like Noah said, we did a whole webinar over plots and pixel mapping, like the ins and outs, and also how to adjust individual lights at this point. Like if on the wall behind it now, like you could also like run an intensity effect over this and just cause for even more in and out and cause it to be different at the same time. And and that's really talked about in that link that I put in the chat.
Cool.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things is, I don't want to do the Y, I want to do the X.
I love the bouncing balls. Those are fun. It's in the basic motion. It's like the 5th or 6th, 5, 6, 7.
These are pretty fun.
Cool stuff with that.
I like to go to what Megan was talking about. You can write an effect on the position. So, like if you were to kind of look at the map, how it's kind of going from left to right, what you can do is you can write an effect. So, like image X position negative 100%, it's all the way to the left. You can basically create an effect where it just goes from, say, left to right like that. Like, literally going into the effect engine using kind of the same effect mentality, and we'll say, we set this back to a 0 value.
And you're applying that to the pixel map, correct?
To the pixel map layer itself, right?
Yeah,
so you could
I was talking about applying it to the fixtures though at the first time.
You can do, it's.
This is just a different thing than what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Oh, I apologize.
And you could also apply like a intensity effect to the pixel map, so the pixel map fades in and out, or does a strobe, or the options are endless.
Basically,
there's a lot of creativity there. So those are just a couple of my favorite tricks, and once again, you can use the pixel map to select fixtures off of. So I'm gonna remove that effect here, and I'll just clear everything out. So instead of you typing in, if you went 701 through enter, we'll just say at full, and then you were to do like a color fan, right? Your fan would go in that selection order, essentially. But what you could do instead is you could select it using your plot as well. So I'm going to select my fixtures, go across, and then come down. And that has essentially changed my selection order. Now, if I were to start fanning my hue, I get a up and down versus a left and right type effect. So something to kind of keep in mind. Let's see what happens if I do that that happy accident I was talking about. So we'll do select these fixtures, plot 1, and then 601. Cool. Media picker, and then we'll just edit this map so that this map is actually 2 by 12. Kind of rough, but you can get kind of like a diagonal type effect.
And then you could rotate the content, and it can go diagonal too. That's another option.
Mm-hmm.
Make a lot of happy accidents just by messing with the ordering and whatnot. But I would do that on a copied plot.
Yes, I was going to say you should copy your plot.
I think I had like 60 plots when I did LDI this last year. I had 60 plots and like 250 layers for all the different solo pix fixtures we had on the rig.
Yeah,
it was a lot of fun.
I like ever since they've created the ease of the pixel map, I've been doing a lot more of my effects through the pixel map because just by the tricks that we're showing, like playing with gamma, playing with contrast, playing with color overlay, you can actually get way more effects than quicker than going into the effects engine and playing with offsets and stuff like that.
Right. Let's do. So I threw this together. I just basically threw the MTG together, like literally as we were kind of waiting in the lobby. We'll see if it actually works. Just to kind of showcase that, you can go in and you don't have to use that grid. You can go in and plot things wherever you want them to be. So that's also 601. So we'll select the fixtures. We'll say plot 2, because this is plot 2, not plot 1 anymore. Enter 601 full, and then choose content. And I think I got color maxed in. Oops, I think I might have made a mistake. Click that out. I'll turn off highlight. Fixtures, plot 2. Enter 601 full. There we go.
There you go.
And then that looks like super fast. So I'm just gonna, you can tone down the playback speed if you need to, which is a beam parameter.
So
sorry, go ahead, Megan.
Oh, I was gonna say, if you are new to plots and you're trying or pixel mapping and you're trying to figure out like how are all these effects achieved, like that we're going through really quickly, hit that beam button and you're gonna see like your whole and like Heinz wheel sets pop up, and just keep hitting beam and you can start seeing different things to play with. So like Noah said, there's the play speed, you have the rotation options here, you have position options here, like image X, Y, Z positions.
Even in control,
scaling.
I think it's control or mode. You can actually select the direction that the content's playing, either forward, back, bump.
Yep, and then there's also bounce. So play mode, reverse bounce. So it'll actually go from left to right, right to left, left to right, right to left, which is just kind of a handy thing.
Now, is that so this is in Noah's plot 2, where he has already assigned 601. Now, if he went into plot 1 and tried to do anything with 601, it wouldn't work because you're already running that plot, or already running Pixel Map 601 in plot 2.
Right.
So that's what we were talking about earlier.
What I would do under normal circumstances is I would have each individual Pixmap layer be its own unique number. So, I mean, what I could do is, let me fix this real quick. I set that back to 8, 23.
Uh-oh.
0 enter, 0 enter. What was that? 800 by 300?
I think it was 820 by 340.
So yeah, okay. There you go. It's close enough. So now, yeah, if I select these fixtures and I now say plot 1, they're actually going to instantly jump into that content.
Yeah.
The reason why is because that layer is being basically controlling 2 different plots, which is useful because if I wanted to change both of these, so I said 601, enter, it would basically be applied to both of those, essentially, right? It's not just, I wouldn't have to go to each individual layer and do it. You might get really fancy. You could do dotted user layers, which is something I've done, but we won't go there in this video.
Like I'll do something like 101 through 104 will be my plot 1, and then 201 through 204 would be my plot 2, whatever. I'm just using arbitrary numbers, but
yeah.
And then you could, if you had it on a separate, on the separate plot, separate layer, what you could do is run in plot 2 that MTG could be a totally different piece of content running on top of this content.
Right.
So.
All right. Anything else you guys wanted to talk about before we move on to kind of our next topic for this webinar?
I do want to say that you can put these pixel map assignments basically into a palette if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
So you could make like I do it in my color palettes and my color directories, where I've already assigned I select my fixtures, I assign it to the plot, and at that point I just put it into a palette for me to recall later, so I don't have to remember all the different steps it has to take. It's just a 1-button push, rather than a 3-button push. And then at that point, I don't even necessarily need the view open. I can just go into my color, select my fixtures, go into my palettes, and then go into my media picker at that point.
Yeah. And in a punting situation, I actually put them in scenes, and I run. I'll just have I'll have it running in the background. Scott Barnes actually did a really great YouTube video on how the different ways he uses pixel maps, either having it constantly running in the background or making it a triggered by cue. Feel free to check that out. I think it's on the university as well.
Probably
it's pretty interesting.
And I just letting y'all know, since this is programmed data, it is all available in your programmer. We're not doing anything behind the scenes. Like if Noah was to apply a pixel map layer, then you can actually see like in the programmer like that we are applying that plot to those specific color and intensity parameters. So we're not doing anything behind the scenes. You could knock out certain parameters if you wanted to. Like I said, we can store it in palettes, cues, scenes, all that good stuff, and you can always see it inside your editor.
Paul asked a question. Spacing using strip lights like Color Force 72s, any tips? So that's kind of like what we were talking about in the training file. So you would just draw the individual cells, because what you would do is you'd compound explode if it's a single fixture, you just compound explode it and you get your dot cell, your dots for each cell, and just throw that in the map.
It's basically the same thing, Paul, I would say, as like what we're doing on the side on the back here.
So there are like these audience blind, and I don't know if by spacing you mean like the spacing between the actual physical fixture, because like there's these audience blaster lights and there's like 8 cells and then there's a gap essentially. So there's a few ways that you can handle that. So we'll do pre-selecting audience blind. Say,
I mean, for me, I don't really like on my plots when I'm doing like my magic sheet, if you will. That's where I'll do like the spacing of my fixtures. Mm-hmm. But when I'm doing like an overall, just kind of like back wall or LED strips, I'll just do them if they're horizontal, I'll do them horizontally. If they're vertically, I'll do them vertically, but I'll do them all kind of gridded together. Mm-hmm. So it's not a jumbled mess.
And I normally don't account for the space in between them. So and that's what Matt was saying also, like, I wouldn't account for the space in between like the audience blinders here. I would just put them right next to each other like Noah's doing, just because it's easier. Your effect. So what'll happen if you do put that space there, you'll never see that piece of content. So like the gray box that you draw around your pixel map is the raster of your video content. Mm-hmm. If there's not a fixture inside that gray box, there is no way for us to put content there. So you're going to miss that piece of content if you don't have a fixture there. So if you wanted a continuous, I'll just say a rainbow, because that's what a continuous color wipe, and you put a space there, you're going to miss a color all the time.
Yeah. Like I did on my last tour, which was November. I had Astera Titan tubes as an LED forest scattered throughout the stage, and they were at different heights and different locations. And when I did my pixel map form, I just did 16 cell, just in a straight line, of these color forces, and I let the actual geometry of the actual fixtures give me the creative height. So I hope that answers your question, Paul.
Oh, and one other thing that we actually haven't mentioned in plots is that you can add plot objects, which I actually haven't had a chance to use on a real theater show yet. But my plan is the next one I do is whenever if I'm setting up a pixel map, I'm also, like I said, I put the palettes in there. Inside the plot, I'm going to just put those palettes that belong to that specific plot window inside. That way, and the groups, right, and either the group button, or I guess I could also add the group button in there. That way it's all inside that window, and I don't have to leave that window also if it's going to be open anyway. And
then you could have a big, if you're on a Roadhog, you can have, a full bore, you can have on one screen just your pixel map, and on the other screen your media picker, and it's just, it's clean, it's easy, and that's all you're looking at.
Yep.
That's actually really smart. I didn't think to do that. I haven't had a chance to do it, actually.
I mean, it was the plan. And I tested it out like during LDI time playing with the rig. But then, well, here we are.
Yeah. Quentin Quarantino.
Cool.
I like that.
Anything else about plots and pixel mapping before we...
I guess something, so I forgot these fixtures that the audience blaster fixtures, they are not color mixable, so they are actually just intensity. You can still pixel map them, you just won't get color, but you'll be able to get intensity and things like that, which is where, using a lot of those, like static images, these kind of black and whites can be really handy. You can use the color stuff, but it's probably just going to look at full. There's a lot of black and white.
It maps values. The intensity to the color as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it matches brightness. It's really cool to use, like, if you have, like, a rig of, like, Source 4s, Parkans, and Fresnels, like, in the, in your plot. There we go. In your plot, and you put in, like, a color wave on top of it. It's actually really cool to see the intensities go in and out, and then your ME gets mad at you because you're running all of the lamps. But it is really cool to do.
I did a project that hasn't released yet because I can't. I'm not done with it. It's on a cruise ship somewhere in France. But it's a warm and a cool, CTO, CTB LEDs on a chandelier. And I used a lot of these grayscale type things to get these movements. And it looks awesome. It's, it would have it would have taken hours to program effects. And then I just go in here and use like down here at the bottom, this, the whatever shapes, a lot of those spirals and those circles, you start playing, again, you play with the contrast, you play with the gamma, and you get these kind of really cool fades going across. It's really rad.
Pixel is fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And it's easy.
It is. Gets you out of jail. Cool. So let's go ahead and move on to some show control topics here. So some of the things that we kind of wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about, we're not really going to be able to showcase it just because it requires extra third-party hardware that I just don't have handy. And so one of them is running Timecode. So Megan and Matt, if you guys, I don't really work with Timecode all that often, but y'all
I'm going to let Matt take this one.
So the only time I've used Timecode is actually on cruise ship projects because I have really good timing. I'd like to think I have really good timing. So like when I do my shows, they're all live. But when I do cruise ship projects where, we've designed a show that's going to run for 10 years, and every 9 months I'm going to get a new master electrician that's going to be running the show. It's just it's the only way to do consistency. So really the only time I've time coded has been on cruise ship projects. That being said, it's great. It will fire your show the same time every time. And what's great is if you have something that's triggering like sound, like MIDI notes and stuff like that, you can actually have the console ignore timecode for a minute and fire MIDI notes off of, like if you're doing an install where somebody touches a door, and there's a timecode thing that's happening and somebody touches some panel, it could be a MIDI note that fires the console, ignores the timecode for a minute, triggers another event, and when that event's done, the time code can take back over again. And that's through a bunch of, comment macros that we went over last week. You would be putting that in your list and everything like that. But I mean, time code to me, I know a lot of people in rock and roll like to do it, especially if you have a lighting director that you want the consistency of the show. But to me, it's kind of like at that point, you're like babysitting, and it's not as much fun. I like to see, as a lighting designer or lighting operator, I like to be playing my console as the musicians are playing on stage. That's the way I see it. I like to see myself as another member of the band. But that's my philosophy on it. Take it or leave it.
Paul said, "Amen" to that.
Amen, my brother.
But I also don't use time code in my shows. My stage manager has a much better sense of timing than I do. Because I get into the sense of I know better than the stage manager when to call the cues, and I don't. Like I'm like, I wrote the cues here. They need to be called here. There's a reason, and then I always jump the gun. But they know how to call cues. My light board ops generally know how to push go when the cue is called. So
yeah. And also I have done stuff where it's not time coded, but it's the Hogs Poor Man time code, where I had a sequence where a stage manager, they were like 25 cues that fired in like 15, 20 seconds. And she just couldn't get the words out of her mouth fast enough. So the learn timing function on your cue list, it will add weights. Is it weights or is it it's weights, right? Weights. Yeah. It'll add weights. So basically the stage manager will give the go for the first cue, and then you poor man time coded these weights, and it will fire in essence as a time code, but it has to be triggered at the right time on the original cue.
I mean, I've done that also. I'm not saying I won't do auto follows and stuff like that for that kind of stuff, because goodness, I don't want someone call like 10 cues in a row just to get the right like sequence of the little dots going across the sky correctly.
And that also, at that point, it remains like you're hoping that the scene shift happens in the right amount of time that you've tacked it. You hope that an actor gets the quick change done fast enough. Like otherwise, I mean, you can stop it by hitting the hold button, but at that point you don't necessarily know where you are in the sequence. So you might as well just let it run. And it's just one of those happy accidents that you hope, the audience doesn't notice.
And 9 times out of 10, they're not going to work. I mean, they're not going to notice.
They're not going to notice. Unless it's Spider-Man, Turn Off the Dark, in which case everyone noticed those train wrecks.
So I could demonstrate that for you if you want. Just throw a cue list together. So, for example, if you are doing something, say, with the music, so here's just a simple cue where lights up, lights move, lights change color, get a gobo, and they zoom out, right? I'm going to set everything to have a 0-second fade time, just so it's kind of snappy. But basically, in your cue list window, there's a little handy button called Learn Timing. And basically, from the time that you enable it and then you press go, it's going to start recording the time between each cue, like Matt was saying. So I'm just going to pause. I'll wait a second, wait another second, pressing go. I'm actually using the main go button here. And just like that, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it's each time you hit go, not between each cue.
Yes.
So that
it's
means
the
if you have
trigger.
a follow in there, the follow does not get counted. Like like if you waited 12 seconds because you have an auto follow in there, it counts that 12 seconds. It's literally from the button hit go.
And you'll notice when Noah he hit the button again, it's just continuing to stamp time, like in his Q1 up there, or Q point. I can't. The screen's so small I can't see it, but
point 1.
It's 0.1. His mark Q, if you will. And of course, if the times you don't like them, you can always go to the window, hit set, and edit the time. You don't need to restamp every time.
And then you can also assign a cue to be manual, and what that means is it will not be overridden by learn timing or timecode values as well. So if you do have something where you just have to be the person that presses go, then you can set to also manual.
And we did that when we were doing when I was working on Hairspray on a certain cruise ship. There were some cues that it was all based on the automation, and there was no way to time it. So we made those cue manual, and instead of having 700 or 800 cues that a stage manager and a lightboard operator were triggering, they were only manually hitting maybe 5 cues in the entire show. Everything else was time coded.
It's like
Right.
easier. So other protocols that you can input into the console includes OSC as well as MIDI note triggers. So if you do have any kind of a physical item on stage, or maybe you're doing a roller coaster ride or something like that, if you have a third-party device that can input into either an OSC message or a MIDI timecode or a MIDI note message, that can all be configured in the console, and then that can trigger other cue lists or scenes or kind of really whatever you want. Anything else you want to add for a third party?
Well, I'm sorry. What was that?
Anything else you guys want to add for a third party?
So one thing about the MIDI note thing, if you open your cue list options, I noticed that the way that they set up this MIDI trigger system was that, so basically my example is in Hairspray, we wanted from an audio cue getting triggered, which were cameras, they wanted strobe lights to look like camera flashes.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did was we set it up down here. You'll look in the IO options. There's you have ignore MSC in, trigger, blah blah. I can't read them all because they're so tiny. But what was happening was when we were releasing that cue list, it was actually the console was sending out a note as well. So we were actually resetting going back to Q1 on the audio playback, on the music playback, and the video playback. So they were all going back to basically pre-show. Mm-hmm. So what you would do is we were just looking to take in the MIDI note. So, and we didn't want to send anything out. So what you would do is you'd go into this and just suppress MSC out, which means anytime you do something to the list, it's not going to send a note out to the other third-party software on the network, in the MIDI network, and trigger those things. So just be aware there are some options in the playback options window.
Yep. And what I would say for practicals for MIDI notes I like a lot is actually going in, like we could put, like I've put a MIDI trigger on like a doorbell or on like a specific like a door, so when it closes, like it actually turns off the lights or something like that. So what I've done is I go into these actual like MIDI settings, like in the network window, setup network console, and go into the MIDI note settings, and I actually assign that specific note to a specific cue that I want it to be to go on. So you can set MIDI note inputs to be comment macros, basically. Nope, you're in the right place. Yep, it's just at the bottom. Comment macros, and then if you hit the little gear, you have all 127-ish notes to actually go and assign. And so whatever note that little MIDI trigger was, I could say, hey, go list 5/3, and that's gonna go into dark, for example. Or I could say go if it's just a specific scene, like for like the camera flash in Matt's case, like I could say go scene 5, and it just flashes on, and then it just auto releases. And then it would flash on and then auto release.
Yep. And Paul asked the question, is that setting for overall use or just the playback list? It's both, actually. So if you went into your preferences, you could actually set that in your preferences window. So if you go down to, right there, you could actually make it a global if you wanted to, or you could do it on a per cue list basis.
But this is MIDI show control, not actual MIDI notes going out, right?
Well, what I found, which was, I don't know if it was supposed to, but I didn't have this suppress thing selected. And maybe it was the way that the network was set up. I'm not sure. But when I released that cue list, it sent that notes out to everything. So it was spitting out notes. Or it was sending something to the main computer. It was very bizarre, but that was my workaround, and that's how I fixed the problem. I didn't really dig too much into it. So I was like, ooh, problem solved. Great.
Yeah. I always, thought it was Midi show control. I didn't think we sent out random like notes like that. I just always knew we sent out show control notes.
Yeah.
Show
I mean, it's also been 3
specific.
years, so maybe I need to go back and look at the show file.
It's only funny because we have a release planned that is going to overhaul a lot of MIDI stuff in the console. So,
Great. More to learn.
more to learn,
That's
more
the time to
stuff.
do it.
It's changing and becoming better and improving and adapting. So,
But yeah, I mean, that's really my tip with MIDI triggers. OSC is nifty in the fact that it's all network based if you need it to. And it's really MIDI and OSC, I think, are really the most open hog you can get with hog. Like, if you want to do anything, like going through OSC is probably possible. It's just all network based at that point.
Yeah.
So
OSC is network. Yeah, OSC is the network, and MIDI is the MIDI.
Yeah. MIDI can also go in through USB, just so, again, everyone who's listening knows it can go through USB. You just plug it into the back of your console. As long as it doesn't require a driver, you should be good to go. Most MIDI devices don't require a driver. OSC, like we've said, is just network based. Show wise, I don't trust it unless I'm able to hardline into the desk.
So that's through the HogNet port, correct?
Yes. OSC is through the HogNet port. So the only console it doesn't work on is a base model. Well, the only console for now that it doesn't work on is a base model Hedgehog 4.
Yeah. And really, the only thing I use OSC for is remotes.
Yep. Yeah. And for me, it just comes down to network things. Just because it is just because network is iffy on Wi-Fi. I mean, even here, I don't do a webinar over Wi-Fi. I do a webinar over my Cat5 cable or over my Ethernet cable because it's less likely to go out at some point.
Yeah. Miles asked a question about remote monitors for designers. For me, Miles, I will just do an external monitor, and usually I'm sitting, when I have been a programmer for theater, I've been next to my lighting designer or next to the gaffer or whatever. So what I'll do is there are several ports on the back of the Hog that you can put in external monitors and then just mirror your views to those monitors. Do you guys, again, I haven't done it yet because I haven't been in a situation like that, but do you do the VGA expanders? Can you plug that in and have multiple, say you're using on the console, I would have as many monitors as possible, but if we need to expand to include a designer remote station.
I don't think we support that. What I've done is I have either set. Usually, I'm right next to our designer also, so it's not really that big of a deal. But I have networked in a Hog 4 PC setup and just made a dedicated view. In that case, that just has whatever they want open. It has the output window open or whatever.
Yeah.
I have also just set up an external monitor and turned that view that they want. Usually, they just want a channel view. So, so there is and they want to see what all the, or at least in my opinion, my experience, they want to just see what all the levels are intensity wise. So we actually have a levels window. If you hold down open, there's a levels button. So I usually just record that into a view, and I make that view additive so that all the views that I recall over will not close that, or I make all my views from that point on additive. So all my views that I recall will not take out their window.
Can you, I know what additive means, but can you explain to the group?
So an additive view means you can, so I'll describe what a not additive view is. So a not additive view is going to close all your windows and then open the windows that are inside that view that you have. A additive window is going to keep adding windows to whatever you have open. So if Noah was to recall I guess the close all doesn't make sense. But his pixel map view right now, it would close all the other windows, so including that view window that he had open. So if he just went through all his windows with focus or just closing them, it's only the views that he recorded because it was not additive. Whereas like the first couple of views on the hog, like palettes, master kinds, output, those are additive by default. So they'll just keep adding to your window collection.
Where is the default control for that? Is that like to make it a global thing if you wanted to?
I believe it's not additive by default.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not additive by
You
default.
just go back into views and change them.
Got it.
Yep. But that's generally what I do. Again, I'm usually right next to my designer though, so it's like, hey, can you tell me what this is at? Or can
The other
or
thing
would you like to look over? Or I give him the media picker and he just picks out what he wants.
Yeah. The other thing that you could do is like what Megan was saying is set up like a backup client server kind of situation with your console. Have if the designer wants to flip through different views, you could set up 2 different users. So he could have his own user and be able to switch through his views and change whatever views he or she would like.
That's what I would do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just depends on how much they want and if you have a laptop or computer available for that. I mean, most of the time, it honestly just depends on what you need.
Yeah. It's kind of like a RFU for EOS.
And if I'm going to do that, then I set them up as not a server. So they're not they can only be like logged in whenever I'm logged in basically to the show file. Just because I don't want to risk anything going wonky on the network. Yeah, that's just.
And you guys can use the nifty little chat window when comms go down.
Yeah. Exactly.
This is my prank window because you can make a macro that opens up this window, says, hello, I'm stuck in here. And then it can you can have it trigger an hour later or like at 3:54 in the afternoon. I use that window for pranks, especially Joe.
I love in the either in the training or in the manual, it's like, hey, the lunch truck's here. It's like, who's still it's like,
Oh,
like, what are we having for lunch? Tacos. Of course.
No. It's the 3 little pigs, and they're having a conversation, and the one says that lunch is here, and the other one asks, what is it? And if one of them says it's, I think it's a chorizo or says something tacos, but the irony in the really bad joke is that it's pork.
Yeah. Womp
Yeah.
womp.
Yep.
Womp womp. Yeah. If you come take our class, you get to see the funny slide.
We are hilarious.
I tried. Cool. Anything else? Show control or any other question? Miles, I hope that helped answer your question. I don't really know if there's like a best practice, so to say. Like most of the industry, you do what's best for your situation at that point. But I think we all discussed the ways that we like to do it.
Yeah. And also it's easier with a network cable rather than finding a very long VGA.
Yeah, that's also true.
Or a DVI or whatever.
Cool. Are we ready to move on to our random odds and ends stuff that we wanted to put in?
Sure.
Cool.
So
Great.
I'll start this. So kind of just a little handy syntax that not a lot of people know exists is the syntax of @ / and then a number. So essentially, if I were to, let's go to open up the group directory here. And let's find find our audience blaster light. So these are at full, but I'm going to say we'll do 20 through 80, enter. Kind of hard to see. Let's just change that up a little bit. Let's do.
It's really hard to see when you don't have the visualizer open.
That also is also a case. Do that. There we go. I'm trying to remember where my front light is. I didn't organize this show file, and I probably should have. So like, if you've got front light, and we'll say at 001. So now we got kind of some sort of an intensity look on stage. We're going to bring up the programmer so you can see those fixtures. What's kind of nice is if you have a bunch of fixtures, there's only 5 in this example, but if you did have a bunch of fixtures, and your designer says, can you just like bring everything down? You could say at / and then say 50, and that would actually take everything and bring it down to half of what it was previously. So you could say at / 200, and that'll bring it back to what it was. So you can kind of proportionally scale your intensity. So if the designer said, can you just take all these fixtures and whatever their intensities are at and put them at 3/4 of what they are, you would say at /75. So everything is brought to 3/4 of the intensity. And so keep in mind that the fixtures that are really bright, like say 100%, are going to go down a greater distance in intensity than the fixtures that were at say 25 or 50%. So just something to kind of keep in mind that you can do is you can just kind of scale your intensities using that at and that slash function. Random little tip that I came up with that I realized we hadn't talked about yet.
You can also do the at -10 or at +25 if you need to like increase like by 25%. You can just do at +25 and that'll add 25% intensity to whatever your values are.
The other thing is using the intensity keys, depending on what console you have. If you have a designer that's like up 10, down 10, up 20, those nifty little keys above the intensity wheel, you can actually assign those to be values. So
right, and that is only on the full bore Hog 4 and the 418. It's not on the Roadhog, Hedgehog, Hoglet.
Yep.
And and then those are customizable. So sometimes if I like to change them also to just be 100% and 0%. Well, I guess that doesn't make too much sense because there's a full button, but it's a quick way to go out if I have it already done. Like, because then I could just quickly hit that button and it goes 0. But most of the time, like the designer I like to work with increases by 5%. So instead of having to hit at +5, at +5, at -5, I just change those buttons to 5%. And then I can just tap the button or lower the other button.
Yeah. It saves you on getting arthritis.
That's in the preferences window under programming intensity bump button step button delta. Say that 10 times fast. So you can set it to say 5.
Unfortunately, I don't think you can do it's so whatever you set that to, it's for the up and the down button. It's not like you can set one to be one and one to be the other.
Yeah, it's the percentage. It's the change that you want to see. It's the change total for the button.
Yep.
Buttons.
Now, if you do have the wheel, you can control kind of the resolution of the wheel. So if you were to crank that wheel up or down, and if you think it's too sensitive or not sensitive enough, you can go in your preferences under sensitivity and then take the I wheel and either increase or decrease it depending on what you feel.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So another little function is touch and suck. I think we might have covered this in another video briefly, but essentially...
My 2 favorite keys.
Yeah, they're kind of fun. What we'll do is we'll just create something here. 1 through at full, and let's take a look at our programmer. And we're just going to take, say, one of these fixtures and move it up. I'll take the other 2. We're just going to put it in some random position here. And then we're going to take all of them. And let's also put it in a color. So we got a lot kind of going on. And we'll also just throw a gobo in. Why not?
Noah's doing his version of Wicked.
I guess. I for training examples, I'm just like, here you go. Here's something that happened on stage.
Yeah.
Same. I'm like, I'm a programmer. I'm not a designer. These colors would never be in a show that I've programmed before, but they're different enough.
There you go.
So there's a lot that you can do with touch and suck. I mean, usually it takes about 30, 45 minutes to kind of explain kind of all the functionalities of it. But the big thing to keep in mind is understanding what the difference is between them, as well as how to filter the information. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up our programmer window, and we're going to say 101 through enter. So that selects the fixtures, and we're going to press suck. And what suck did is it pulled in all the values for those fixtures that were selected and grabs anything that was programmed in. So
it doesn't touch default. It doesn't touch the default values.
Right. So it touched the intensity and it touched the pan and tilt for those 3 fixtures that I had moved, but it doesn't suck in the values for the fixtures I didn't move, and then the color for all the fixtures. So that's what suck does. Touch, on the other hand, so if I said 101 through and touch will grab everything, regardless of whether or not it was programmed that way or not. So that allows you to sort of pull in data or not pull in data. You can add a filter onto that as well. So if you were to say 101 through and you were to say color suck, it would only suck the color values. Or if you were to say, 103, enter, and you were to say, we'll say beam touch, it's only going to touch the beam values.
Yeah.
So kind of keep that information. If you're trying to grab information from one place or trying to grab whatever your fixtures are currently doing, you can do that.
Useful. There are actually a couple of useful theatrical things for this. So if you wanted to create a block queue, which we don't really have anything that's specified as block on the console except the unblock button, but we don't have a block button. If you wanted to create, like, say you're in a blackout situation and you don't want any information to track past that, you can actually hit live touch and it will suck in all the information. If you did live touch, you would take all the fixtures. But and then if you recorded it as state, that would create, in essence, what we would call a block queue. So nothing would move past that. Another really nifty, as we were talking about, the basis of the console is tracking, right? It will only register what is changing in the console. So say you accidentally tracked an intensity of a light or a fixture through there, you could actually use something very cool in the suck feature. So you could select a fixture, do color suck, and then actually do a record remove, which will actually remove just that color information from that queue moving forward. That's another way you could use touch and suck. If you are in a queue list that you really liked your positioning of something and you wanted to record that as a separate position, you'd select the fixtures, do position suck, and then record that as a position group, for instance. There are just options. It's a way to get information into your programmer.
From one place to another.
Yep.
I'll do that record remove example. So
record remove is so powerful. Like, once you know how to harness it, instead of re-recording cues, you could just you're removing the information from that cue list without needing to start from scratch.
So I'll do that example here. So I selected 101 through 105, and then we'll say color suck. We'll say record, and then we're going to press the soft key for remove, which is on our record toolbar. And then we're going to say, we could just say Q1, but I'm going to say list 12 Q1, because that's the queue that's currently playing on stage. And then press enter, clear, and whenever I clear my programmer, it has removed just the color information from that queue. So you brought it into the programmer, and then you removed it out. There's more than one way to do essentially that exact same function, so I'll just undo that. So I prefer the QQ, open up the queue itself, and then
knock it out.
Backspace color, that essentially does the same thing. It's just depending on what way your brain works or which way you want to do the syntax, essentially. And, maybe you wanted to keep that information in your programmer. That's another reason why maybe you want to open up the editor versus you want to use the programmer to remove that information.
Yep. And the other thing is, in case you just want to remove the color from one queue, you could do record remove Q1, and then just make sure your tracking forward is deselected, and it will just do it in that queue. You could do it in a range, so you could do record remove Q1 through 5. And then just make sure you don't have the tracking forward enabled. And it allows you to really target what you want to change in a queue.
There's also one other thing that I've kind of noticed, and this is something that I don't use frequently in my workflow, but I have a couple of times, and it's been really handy, and that is pig touch. So we'll say 101 through, and then if you hold down pig and you press touch, you'll note there's a slight difference in the programmer. So previously, the values had like that dark blue background. So if I were to clear it out and say 101 through enter touch, see how everything has a dark blue background? Whereas if I said 101 through enter pig touch, what that does is that pulls the information into my programmer. But if I were to press record or merge or whatever I'm taking with this information, it's actually not going to take it over. And that's handy because if I wanted to keep information to my programmer and have it sort of override playback essentially, so nothing I do on any other playback source, if I were to press play on any other cue list there, is going to override my programmer. But there's an advantage here because if I were to hit record right now or do something, it's not going to include the intensity or not going to include this information. So if I did go in and I were to, you know, change the color.
So it's kind of like a force. It's like a force assert, kind of, right?
Kind of, yeah. So I just changed the color values just now, and now if I were to hit record, the only thing that would actually get recorded is just the things with the dark blue background. So it's kind of a handy tool. It's something I don't use a whole lot in my workflow, but I have used it a couple of times for very specific circumstances where I kind of needed that value, that information in my programmer, but I didn't want to record it.
Yep. Also Pig Live I found useful sometimes as well, where it grabs the fixtures that are at 0%, like if they're doing something. So not so they still have to be doing something in the queue. So like if I have fixtures in the queue before that are in red, they're just at 0% intensity. Pig Live will let me grab the fixtures that are not currently on.
Yeah. You could also break it down to if a designer says, I want whatever colors or, you know, I want all the fixtures on stage that are red. I want to be blue. I think it's color.
And then the color palette.
Live, the color palette. Yep. Right? Touch.
Well, that if you just hit live color palette enter, that'll just select the fixtures that you already have, and then you can just go and change them.
Yeah.
But yeah,
or you could do that with really position, useful. Beam, anything that you have a palette written for.
And it's also another use case of why I always use palettes, even if I only used it one time. It's still a use case I use palettes because maybe that's the only time I use the color purple. But then there's going to be that one time the designer or someone's going to come to me and be like, I don't like that purple color. Can you change that all for the lights?
Yeah.
And not only is it my Solo Spot 2000s, but it's also the cyc lights. It's also the foot lights. It's every single light that could change color is purple in this moment. So the easy way to select it would just be live, purple, and then change the color to whatever.
The other thing you could do is if a designer's like, I want all you have spots and washes that are red. They're like, I want all the washes that are red to be blue. You can do live I think this is where you use the / select the fixture and then the color, or the fixture group and then the color, and it will select the washes in that red, and you could change the color.
It allows you to filter live within a group.
Yes.
Yeah. Live in that / or live has a lot of nifty things, and palettes are super useful, and that / key that Matt just said is also super duper useful. It's just something to always keep in your back pocket because you never know when you need to like only apply to like certain fixtures at that point in time.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like there are some people when I'm programming shows that are like, how are you moving so fast? And it's these little shortcuts that I know of. Again, I haven't programmed a show in a long time. So when you sit behind a console, it's like riding a bike, you'll never forget, but I'm not behind a console right now. So, but yeah, it's these little shortcuts that you can do. It just allows you to program way faster.
Another kind of odd and end thing that I wanted to bring up is the functionality of flip. So what flip does, we'll kind of do this. We'll do 121. So there's the fixtures, 2x4, essentially. What flip does is we'll just kind of pick a position here, a little bit up or downstage and a little bit over stage left. And what flip does is it inverses the pan and tilt values. So if I were to hit flip, the positioning on stage is basically the same, but the pan and tilt values, if you look in the programmer there, are actually going to be different. So there's usually about 3 different combinations to get to any point on stage. Why do I think this is really useful? It's useful for a couple of functions. One of them is, let's say that you're programming a cue, and so this is, we'll just say this is your first cue. and then you wanted your fixtures to go after here. You wanted them to go over, say, here. And I'm actually just going to select one of these fixtures, and I'm going to flip it intentionally. So we're going to say this fixture.
Yeah, this is exactly what I do, because we've all made bum position groups where you have that one light that does like the full loop around.
And you could be doing this, accidentally. So we'll play the first cue, right? And then here we go into our next cue, and you'll see that one fixture is like doing the wrong thing. Yeah. So that's where you can go into that cue and you say, all right, that's fixture number, I think it was 127. I can't remember. And then you can go back and you say, I want to flip you. And then you just kind of figure out which orientation it needs to be in. And then you would update the cue and then replay it again. So go back to Q1. You say, all right, now let me see that transition. Okay, that's the right transition. So flip's really easy. I will say that it, depending on how the fixture is oriented, it won't always be perfect. This is assuming that the fixture is perfectly hung, level on all the different axes and everything.
Yeah.
But that, it is kind of a handy tool. I've also, I personally use it for design reasons where, so 121 through at full. So something that I personally like to do is if I do a color wheel spin, so I'll spin my color wheel here. Very slowly it's coming in. You'll note that kind of everything is coming in from the stage left to the stage right. That's the sort of the direction that the color wheel is going. What I personally like to do is I'll select, like, say, half my fixture. So I hit select even, and then I hit flip. And now what happens is you've essentially flipped the orientation of the fixture from doing what it was previously to kind of like this, the actual head itself. So if you do have some fixtures that have like a color wheel on them, and you don't want everything to come in from the same side, you can take like half your fixtures and flip them, and now you've got your wheel coming in from the outer parts of the stage.
That's so cool. I actually never thought to do that.
Yeah, I would have just done well, I guess if I do minus, then they're going the opposite way too, huh?
Yeah,
so
the opposite color range.
Minus is cool. That's the way you have to do it.
Yeah.
Noah just taught me something.
I always say whenever I do whenever I do training like in person, I also always learn something new. Like in each, there's at least one thing from each class, just because someone does it a different way.
Yeah,
like more than one way is gonna hog.
Yeah.
So that's one of the great things about hog is it's like there are. I mean, it could be a greatness or a detriment to some people, but I love that you can get to the same from point A to point B in multiple different ways.
So I just did what you were talking about, Megan, where I took half of fixtures and you inverted. So that's the thing is one half is spinning clockwise, one half is spinning counterclockwise. The advantage of flip is that it keeps them going the same ordering, but it just takes the wheel and makes it come in from the other direction.
Right.
So it's just a handy thing. I will say that there have been several moments where I've used that trick and it doesn't look great just because of either the orientation of the fixtures or just for whatever reason. In a visualizer, it always looks awesome, but in the real world, it
zeros and ones, man, they look great.
Yeah. So just another little handy tool. Flip can get you cool effects, but also get you that stupid tracking issue. Your fixtures are going to go the most direct path that they can take to get to their destination.
Again, that's where having position palettes. Because then what you can do is you flipped it. You might want it flipped for the hard and just record the key with the hard values and then just go back to your old palettes, or record another palette. But the main things I use flip for are those, when I'm doing my area groups, like down left, down center, down right, and I'm doing my moving lights, and I guarantee you I'm not paying attention because a director's talking to me. And there's like one or two of those lights that do the loop around.
Yep.
So then I hit the flip.
Yep.
Cool. The one disadvantage to this, though, is that if you select your fixtures and you go, I'm going to tilt them, they're flipped.
Yeah.
So, it's great. But then keep in mind that you might have to redo your fixtures, get them in the right position, and then reflip them at the end. Something to kind of keep in mind. Cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we had for the rest of this webinar series. Matt, Megan, do you guys have anything else you want to
Yeah.
say here?
Real quick, because like at the end of our notes, it said preferences. One thing I do like to change, and I got this actually from Colin Wood. I think it was sometime last year. But what he does for his, and this is very theater specific because I'm more than likely going to have to, it's dealing with timing. I'm more than likely going to have to go and update my time for most cues, if not all cues, just because there needs to be specific fades, all that kind of stuff, is I will set my default timing to be like a 5.7 or something like that, so that I can, as I'm recording my cues in, before I have the timing set to like people coming on stage, set moving, all that kind of stuff, I know what cues I have and haven't touched at that point.
So that's why you do an abstract strain. I was like 5.7. That's so weird.
And it's like a really random thing. It's like,
I got you.
if you do like, I was gonna say 5.5, but that's like it's pretty common to have to use half seconds. So like doing like a 5.7, it's like something completely random.
Yeah. 5.01 would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
The other thing is
also work.
Yeah. Did we talk about Remdim?
Probably not.
Everyone knows how Remdim works, I'm assuming, but for those who don't, Remdim is remainder dim. So what you would do is if you had, say, these lights on stage, and you only wanted a couple of them, so you do like 121 and 122 at full, and then hit the Remdim button. Actually, what you have to do is activate it, because it's by default now unactivated, which is so annoying.
Mm-hmm.
But
there's a reason.
Trust me, I know
the story.
There's a reason, but it has also gone and affected everyone who's also programmed on Hog Forever.
It's weird because I was teaching a Hog class and I was like, hey, guys, like nobody told me that it changed. So I was like, and then this is Remdim, and they're like, there's no Remdim. I was like, what are you talking about? It's grayed out.
It
and
happens.
I was like, don't get this. I'm not lying to you. And then it's a preference. You got to go in there to, I think it's in miscellaneous or programming.
It's in programming.
Yeah. That its default is disable Remdim because somebody didn't know what Remdim did and hit it accidentally on a show.
I think it's that it's right next to knockout. Whereas if you knock out one fixture, it's okay. Whereas if you hit Remdim with one fixture, which we're about to talk about, it might not be okay, especially if you chose that one practical that is just the one light source of the lamp.
Got it. Fat finger, basically, is what you're saying. Fair enough.
Anyway.
Takes everything that you don't have selected to zero.
Yeah.
That's basically what it does.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny because the button right next to it is out, which will take that fixture to zero. And then the other one is knockout, which if you have information in your programmer, so I'm going to say live suck and then pick release. So now if I press knockout, it also turns off fixtures. So I just find a little bit of irony in it just because, the two buttons right next to it also turn fixtures off.
That's where I've also started on the touch screen. Sometimes I've used like the pencils with the little tip, like especially with those buttons down there. Because sometimes if your screen isn't calibrated or you get dust on it, like you're just like, damn it.
And what's cool about the older full bores, Roadhogs, and older full bores, Roadhogs, and Hog 4s is in the original display, they are not capacitive touch like your phones are. Like you have to have heat to like actually work the phones. They are resistive touch. So like I can just use my normal pencil or pen and tap on the screen wherever I want to. So like if I'm taking a note and then the director, and then I'm like, oh, I need to do something real quick. Part of me is also just like flip the pen around or flip the pencil around to get to the eraser or the end part and just tap on the screen and it goes.
Yeah.
And that has now been darn technology for being better.
Yeah.
I'll
just get you one of those like winter gloves that have the touch thing.
Well, that doesn't help the fact that I do the pencil to go and touch. And it used to not be too much of an issue. And this is getting like really first world, but I guess it used to not be too much of an issue because my iPad stylus actually had the capacitive touch at the end. But since upgrading to the Pro, you have the Apple Pencil, which doesn't have a capacitive touch at the end. It only has whatever's special for the iPad.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't have a stylus/pen on me anymore because I don't use it.
Yeah.
We have some high-end pens, and I swear
As
I
I
got
say,
one on my
on the
desk.
floor, I'm able to pick one up.
There you go. I was looking for one of mine. I'm like over here trying to find one.
I knocked it off earlier.
Yeah, so you just took my pen. But yeah,
That's
those are
it.
super awesome. I actually like programming with a stylus. It's kind of a, I don't know,
It's different.
Makes me feel official, I guess. I don't know.
And it also keeps the smudges off the screen.
Yeah. Which means my Instagram pictures are better.
Hashtag programmer problems.
Cool.
Cool.
Is there anything else, guys?
I think that covers a lot of the topics that we wanted to cover with this series. So if you want, we can move into a Q&A. We're kind of pushing our time slot right now. So if anyone has any questions, we'll try to answer them. But besides that, thank you everybody for coming and attending. And the video will be on YouTube in probably about a week or two.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been fun, guys. Thanks for inviting me to this.
Yeah, no problem.